Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Championship Leadership. And today we got Colin Morgan with us. He's out of Toronto, Canada. He's a Vikings fan, I just found out, which I won't hold against him. But I do live in the land of Vikings. And yes, we got a little bit of rivalry, of course, because I'm a Packer fan. But he's the host of the Daily Grind podcast, over 2.5 million downloads. Also does a lot of speaking. And so thank you so much for being here today, man. I appreciate it.
Nate, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. The first question I'd like to ask you is the name of the podcast is Championship Leadership. So, what is present for you, or what does that mean to you when you hear championship leadership?
Championship leadership. All right. When I hear that, I think it's about leading people to win.
Yeah.
And I'll sort of build on that. Like, I think when we hear winning, it's all about results, right? And I grew up in a sports background. I had a sports background, and there's sort of this sort of win at all cost mentality. And I think a lot of times we try to tell people what success is and what winning is. And I think true leadership is being able to show people and allow them to find their own path, because what's successful to me could be different from you, and it could be different from everyone else listening. And I think that allowing people to find their way and find what they're truly passionate about and love to do, I feel like that's championship leadership.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I love it. That's great. Talk to us a little bit about you and maybe your path. I know you were close to breaking into the PGA Tour, got a little bit burnt out, kind of lost your passion for it along the way. Your message is a bit about talking, about abuse in sports. And so could you maybe just go into that and your path and what you're up to and how you've gotten to where you are today?
No doubt. So I'll do sort of a brief story background here. For me, like, sports were everything where I grew up. My parents were both entrepreneurs. They instilled in me a belief that I could do and be whatever I wanted. And for me, that was an athlete. Growing up in Canada, my first love was obviously hockey.
Yeah.
But I got to a certain age and I realized, I'm not growing. I'm not as fast as everyone else. I have a true love for it. But
Yeah.
during that moment, I started to really succeed in golf. I played golf from a very young age. My parents brought me to the golf course. I loved it during the summertime. And I started to play tournaments and I started to do really well and I started to win. And all of a sudden I started to get all this praise and I just fell in love with the game. And from a young age, I'd be the one, my parents would drop me off early morning and would pick me up late at night and would have to drag me off the putting green. I'd be hitting in that 10-foot putt at the Masters to win against Tiger Woods. Like, I was that kid. And all that hard work, and I practiced really hard and I was dedicated and I did everything possible because I wanted to be that professional golfer. I wanted to show people in my community and in my town and in my school that you can do it. And that culminated into me getting a full scholarship to the US, where I was, I felt blessed, right? Like I was there. This is a stepping stone to get me to the next level. And it was at university where sort of my life changed. And I faced abuse in my time at university, mentally, physically, and sexually. And that affected my life going forward for a number of years. After university, I left after 2 years of university, and I knew that I didn't want to go back to school. I really had nothing else. So I decided, let's play golf. This is kind of all I had. I wanted to do it. And in golf, you can start early. So I'm like, I'm going to start my path towards the PGA Tour. And I did it for about 2.5 years. I played many tours. I saw some success, but so everything that happened in my past was lingering, and I was beating myself up and I wasn't treating myself properly and I was abusing myself, alcohol. Not that I was an alcoholic, but I was using it as the way to get out of my own head and be someone new. And everything I thought of what a man should be, tough. I'm an athletic man and I went through this abuse. Like, for me, I did everything in my power to become that athletic man after that happened, to be able to prove to me and for some reason everyone else that, I'm this rugged, tough athlete. And that affected everything in my life. And I came to a point where I was in Arizona. My brother was caddying for me. I was playing in a big tournament. And on the 9th hole, I just looked at him and, I had a mini breakdown. I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm super unhappy. I've lost all my passion. Like, everything I work for, like, I don't see myself doing this. I can't do this. I'm super unhappy. And it was at that point I realized I needed to transition. And as you know, many athletes, it takes a long time to be able to transition out of that, because my whole life has been focused towards this one thing. And I feel like that had been taken away from me. And now I have to go and find a new passion. And it was really, really hard for me. It took me a number of different years. I failed at businesses I started. I couldn't hold a job. I got fired. And then finally one day I went to my dad, who was running a business, and I'm like, what are you doing here? I need help. And he took me in, and I started working with him. And from that, I started to learn what was wrong, and I started to deal with my internal issues. And as I dealt with my internal issues and I became okay with what happened and started to share with what happened, the healing process came. And this all happened through a very short period of time. It was one meeting. I spoke with someone, and I just had this question always in my life of like, why me? Like, why does this happen to me? I'm sure a lot of you listening, and even you, Nate, you kind of go through that. You're like, why me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember her just saying something to me. She's like, Colin, why not you? And for some reason that really stuck with me. Like for some reason that just like hit home. It needed to say nothing else. And I started to realize, why not me? I have the support system. I have the mental fortitude. I have the desire to get out of what I'm doing and change my life and do something amazing. And that's what I started to do. 2 years ago, I started the Daily Grind podcast. A year later, I was doing it full-time as a full-time entrepreneur. And, the past 6 months, I've been able to start to share my story to athletes who are like me, who are in university, who are full of drive and passion, and be able to share with them my story to hopefully prevent others from instances of abuse in sports. And, that really is my passion. But being able to hear stories and share mine, I think that's a blessing. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, what a powerful shift, right? Just by a simple question. Like, powerful questions can be so powerful in that way, right? Of why not you? And what, talk maybe a little bit more about the abuse in sports. Is this something that really is prevalent, maybe even more so than we realize?
Yeah, you know what? It's shocking. As I was starting to go through a healing process myself, I think when you go through things, a lot of times you feel alone. Like I felt like I was the only person. Like I'm a male, I'm straight, I'm going through these incidences. You feel like the only one. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize that like, wow, there's so many instances of this that go untold, and so many people who go through the same thing. And you read these forums, and I started to like dive in. And what I realized is that abuse in sports is 2 to 3 times higher than in any major industry in the world. That includes manufacturing, education, healthcare, and the military. Like this is 2 to 3 times higher than instances of abuse in the military. And we hear that instances of abuse in the military happen all the time. In sports, you don't think that way. But what happens is that as an athlete, when you want something so badly, like for me, my sport, golf, was linked to who I was. Yeah. If I didn't play well, I wasn't happy. Yeah. If I played well, I was happy. It was linked to my identity. And I was willing to do whatever it took to get to that next level. And you see this happen in the Olympic level, and you see it happen at the collegiate level. And you have these people who are in the way, and you need to be able to make happy because they hold all the cards, right? Like they're going to determine whether you hold your scholarship, whether you play or don't play, whether you make the team or don't make the team, whether you get to the next level or don't. So they have so much power over you. And unfortunately, as athletes, when you're going through that, you don't think that you have choices. So you typically succumb to a lot of these things. And we're hearing it right now. It's starting to come out a lot with coaches here in Canada and hockey level. See it in the football level. And I think you're going to hear more and more and more of it, because as you look down at every single level, it seems to be a common theme. And what we need to do is start to talk about it, to have that conversation, to realize that there is a problem. And when you do realize that there is a problem, then you can start to make the necessary actions towards making a positive change.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing, I would imagine, right? Because, I'm a parent, I got 3 kids, and my kids are active, they play sports, and it's definitely something that I think about and worry about, but it's also something that's like people just don't really want to talk about either, right? It's just like, it's not going to happen to our kids, or like you
Absolutely.
know, and just like let's just not talk about it because it's not comfortable to talk about. But yet, like, man, it's a conversation that should be had. Is definitely with your kids too, right? I can imagine from like, hey, you gotta be able to talk to me if something like, God forbid
Yeah.
something does happen. Like,
You just need to know that there is a conversation to be had, and
yeah,
if you know it and everyone else knows it, like the worst thing you can do is shy away from it. Like it's knowing that it's
yeah,
like someone who has mustard all over their face and a friend who doesn't say anything, right?
yeah,
It's like I don't want to offend them.
yeah, right, right,
Like there's a problem. You got to
yeah,
talk about it.
yeah,
And by talking about it, what will happen is that slowly over time, the conversation will start to go up and up and up. And until it reaches the levels of like policy is in place
yeah.
and there's laws set out on how you do things, nothing will, you can reduce it, but nothing will truly change until it gets to that level. But we're at the very beginning stages right now, and it's super important.
So, of course, you would hope that you had never had to experience the abuse that you did, but at the same time, you're using that to do some good, right? To bring some
Mm-hmm.
awareness and maybe even some change, and more than likely, had it not happened to you, you wouldn't be on that path. And then there's the question of why not you, and so you're taking this to do some good, of course. What what what's the vision for you on what you want to do, and the changes, or maybe the impact that you want to make, um, because of some of the experiences that you've had?
Well, there's an experience that happened to me that really shifted my life completely. I had a good friend who I went to school with, who at the time was hurting, but I didn't know he was kind of going through something similar to me. And 3 years ago now, he called me out of the blue and he's like, "I'm coming to Canada." I'm like, "All right, man, come on down. How long are you
Yeah.
coming for?" He's like, "A week." So I'm like, "Perfect. I have a golf tournament. I was playing golf back then. Actually, this was like 5-6 years ago. So apologies for that."
Yeah, no,
5-6
yeah,
years, he calls down. And what was supposed to be a week turned into a summer. And he was from a different country, different place. And I didn't know he was hiding for something at the time. Obviously, he was going through something himself, which he definitely was.
yeah,
And, during that month, he instilled in me, he was a military man. So he instilled in me a lot of the discipline and structure, which I desperately needed at that time because I had some really bad behaviors and habits. And that led into some really good results in golf. And we had this like path and vision for what we wanted. We were going to play in the PGA Tour, him as my caddy, me as the player. And see what happens when you don't deal with your issues, which I hadn't dealt with my issue then. He hadn't either, is that
mm-hmm.
stuff boils up. And it boiled up for us where everything was good, but we had one disagreement on a final round on the last hole. And we got in a car and we drove 2.5 hours, did not say a single word to one another. Okay. Like,
Yeah,
like not a single word.
yeah,
We're both stubborn,
yeah,
right? Because we're both like hurting, right? It's like, no, I'm not. Like, we have this like thing where it's like, I'm so stubborn, I'm not going to say anything. I just
mm-hmm.
stared down 2.5 hours. We got back to my house. He went, packed his stuff up, took his car, drove home. I was the last time I saw him.
Wow,
And 2 years after that, I got a phone call from a friend of mine telling me that, he took his own life.
mm.
And it was sort of at that instant where kind of things come full circle and you realize like, wow, like I need to change, or that could be me.
Yeah,
And I need to do things differently. And it's these little instances that you have happen. And unfortunately, like you said, I wish these things never happen.
yeah,
But sometimes they're necessary for you in order to make that change. And
yeah,
for me, that was the driving force behind me wanting to do good, start to share my story. And my whole goal with everything that I do is if I just affect one kid, one athlete, or even better yet, I affect one coach, and I can prevent this from happening to one other person and save a life, that to me is worth everything that I do. And
yeah,
I'll continue to do it just knowing that, because that's enough drive and fuel for me to do what I want to do.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What's who are some championship leaders in your life, or and really the question is less about like who it is, but more about like what about them in your mind made them just this incredible leader, or coach, or mentor? Maybe it's directly or indirectly in your life that's helped kind of shape you, and maybe some things that you've taken from them to make you who you are today inside your life.
Yeah, I played for a lot of coaches, and coaches in sports, and also I've had coaches in business too, right? You're a coach, you deal with this stuff. For me, I respect people that lead by example. So many coaches that I've had that tell you to do certain things, but they're not doing it themselves. And when you don't do it yourself, it's hard to believe, right? And that's where I think leadership comes in. It's like leading. Like that means that you do it, and then people are following your path. You're the one who's carving it out, and therefore people can learn your ways and start to follow what it is that you're doing. And not only that, but show you how you can create your own path and start to create that leadership path yourself and allow others to follow. So for me, it's people who lead by example, who do the right things. They don't just speak about it, but it's why we see in sports, right? There's either vocal leaders, and then there's leaders who just do things right, like in the gym, health wise, physical fitness, on the ice, on the field. Like no matter, they just lead by example. And I feel like for me, all the best leaders I've always have had that ability. And then going back, like I know I talk about abuse in sports, but the best leaders I've had were also really hard on me. Like who push you and hold you accountable. But the biggest thing is there's the respect level there, right? Like there's a respect level for them knowing, and there's always that line, but you need people who are hard on you. And you need to be able to judge, does this person need this type of leadership, or do we need to push them in a different way? And it really is an art. Like what you do is an art when it comes to coaching people, because each person learns differently. Each person has different motivational factors. And for me, it's about the people who have been able to identify that in me and be able to push the right buttons to get me to do, ultimately what I've set out to do. So for me, it's people who lead by example and hold you accountable and be tough on you to make sure that you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. It's, what I hear you saying really is, there isn't, as the great leaders, they don't just lead one way and they don't lead everybody the same way. Right. I mean,
100%.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
I always like to ask this question, and maybe we've already kind of talked about it, but turning points, critical moments, or decisions that you've had in your life. I think we've all had them, and it's good to hear, these examples from others as well. Some of the listeners might actually be in this moment right now where they're just trying to figure out which way to go. And it's like this, it's a defining moment, whichever way they choose is going to kind of determine the path that they're on. And I know you've had some of those, and that it's the reason you are where you are today, but is there one that's really present for you where you could be somewhere completely different had you not decided to make the decision you did?
Yeah, I started to be, like I said, I was extremely stubborn. And at that point, like I couldn't take direction. Like I had a very difficult time listening. I felt like I was the one with all the answers. And if I, postured any other way, I was weak. Yeah. And it was the moment where I started to really become a student again. And I looked at it as an athlete, and I'm like, how did I get better at golf and at hockey and all these different sports that I played? And it's like, I had this beginner mindset where I always had this thirst to improve on what it is that I was doing. But that doesn't come easy. A lot of people, like for me, I sat back and I was always looking for what I wanted, right? I was trying to find my passion. I kept hearing that over and over, to like find your passion.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know if I can swear. Can I swear on this podcast or no?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Okay. For me, I was sitting back. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about golf, but I'm not doing that anymore. Right. So I've had this frustration. But what I started to lead with is not what I'm passionate about, but what I was really passionate about, what I didn't want to do. I always knew that I didn't want to get a desk job, that I didn't want to go in 9 to 5, because I saw the way my father lived. I saw the way my mother lived as entrepreneurs. I wanted that. So it's not that I knew what I didn't want to do. It's that I knew what I really didn't want to do. And I let that fuel me. And as I let that fuel me, I really started to take that beginner mindset and learn from other people and be able to take criticism finally, and then start to improve, which is really difficult to do for people. But I think if you can start with what you don't want to do, and then really start to listen to people around you of like, hey, even ask people, like, what do you think of me? Like, what do you think of me? Like, take that really, like, that's hard to do.
It is hard
right?
to do.
Like,
Yeah.
people are like, you're lazy. You always take the easy road. You try to get
Yeah.
out of it. It's like, oh man,
You got
that
to be
sucks.
prepared to hear what they have to say, right?
Yeah. And you got to be able to take that and just be
Yeah.
like, okay, thank you. Because without being aware of what it is that you're doing, change does not occur. You really need to be aware of who you are and what you do and the habits you have. And without that awareness, change does not happen. So for me, it's just like I had to start to become a learner and realize that I can't do everything myself.
Oh, that's great. So you have this podcast. It's successful. Like you're doing it full time. And I think, I run into a lot of people with my podcast, and, I'm building it and I'm trying to get it going, and I'd love for it to be something that could be a full-time thing as well. And so, I think, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a business or, a traditional business or whatever, like and there's really no roadmap, to do it.
No.
What would you say for those that are wanting to do something similar? I get people all the time, I want to have a podcast. I want to start a podcast. What are you doing? How do you do it? And again, I've kind of done the same thing. You learn from others along the way, and you kind of you go and you do what you think is right, and you figure it out along the way. Just like any entrepreneur would do. Like, what are some things that you would have to say for those that are looking to kind of follow in your path?
I would say first and foremost, stop thinking about it and just do it. Yeah. Like, there is never the right time. You're going to make a bunch of mistakes, and you'd rather make them now so that in 4 months you're ahead of the curve and you're actually starting to roll. Whereas in 4 months, now you're just going through that learning process. It just continuously puts you behind. And if you try to think that you're going to do everything perfectly, you're not. I always laugh. For me, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start. I reached out to people. I didn't have a name of a podcast. I didn't know what I was going to talk about, but I had 20 guests before I had a name of my show. Like, just thinking, awesome. I had 20 guests, and then I'm like, okay, now I got to do it. Right. I'm holding myself accountable. Yeah. I put the pressure on myself. And then through that, you start to figure it out. You start to ask questions. The first 20 interviews I did, I always laugh. I did them shirtless. I was sweating so much. I was nervous. I spent hours editing my show because I hated the way I sounded, and I didn't want all the ums and ahs and pauses. Yeah. I tried to be perfect, right? But that's just the learning experience you go through, and those are the things you can look back on and laugh about. But for me, it's like I just took the action, and once I took the action, you start to figure things out. And then again, look at people who have done it before. Like for you, Nate, like if the people want to be a coach, the value in emailing you, once a week. Hey, Nate, I'm sorry to bug you. I'm starting my coaching practice. Would you be able to give me any tips? Like, anything helps, maybe a 15-minute phone call. I'm telling you, listening, you would be amazed at the response that Nate would give.
Yeah.
Or if you did that to me,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's just like, ask for help and just go. Like, just go. Like anything else is going to hold you back and make you start to think, maybe I shouldn't, maybe no, maybe not.
That's, and I'm sure you've ran into this yourself, and I do as well. It's just that some of the people that you probably had on your podcast that you probably, before you made the request, you're like, oh, this person would never come on. And some of it, like, you will be so surprised by who does and who doesn't, by just like making the request. Right.
Totally. And I learned that from, I had one job where I was selling international real estate. Okay.
Yeah.
International real estate. People, second homes, and I was on a call list. So I was on a computer like this, little headset, and I automatic dials, and I made thousands of calls. Like when it hung up, it just automatically dialed the next number. And going through that process of like, no, fuck off, don't talk to me. I'm at work. I'm with my kids. Go away. But realize, okay, I got like 300 people that told me to go away, but then I had one conversation. Yeah. And that conversation leads to something. So it's just like all about, it's being comfortable with people telling you no, or people telling you to go away. Like that's such a big thing, I think.
That's a character builder right there. So
totally.
And by the way, it's funny to hear that you're like, the first 20 episodes you did with your shirt off, and here he is today. If you're not watching, you're listening. He's got a sweater on, like
a big sweater. I'm a little chilly.
He's definitely comfortable.
Well, I've done today is episode 460.
Is it
I've
really?
recorded over 500.
Yeah.
So it's like anything else, right? I learned from as an athlete playing golf.
Yeah.
My dad always told me 10,000 hours. So I'm like,
That's
you know
right.
what? I'm going to accelerate at a fast rate. And that's what I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. That's great. We'll start to wrap it up here. What's one or two things you could leave with the listeners to really help them maybe even move forward today? Like just something they could implement, guiding principles or life lessons that you could give them to move them forward a little bit.
Yeah. I think that everyone talks about mindset. Like I think so many people talk about mindset. And for me, my mindset did not shift until I changed my habits. Yeah. Until I realized for me, I was sitting on a couch at 22 years old playing video games, and that was not going to get me anywhere. I could think about where I wanted to be all day long, but my habits needed to lead me into creating that better mindset for myself. So I would get off the couch, stop playing these things, start educating myself. So it starts with the daily things you do and start small. Like whether your goal is money or whether your goal is physical fitness or health, start small. If it's physical fitness, I am going to do 2 push-ups a day for a week. Set that goal and achieve that goal. And then you can look at yourself at the end of the week and you kept the promise that you made to yourself and you can be proud of it. And then what happens is you never do 2 push-ups. So all of a sudden those 2 turned into 10, which turned into 20, which turned into 30. And all of a sudden you get addicted to this feeling and you start to improve naturally, but start small. I think if you start small, that really leads to the big results.
Yeah, perfect. I love it. Thank you. What are a few ways we can find out about more about you, your podcast, and what you're up to?
You can go to dailygrindpodcast.com and check out my website there. You can follow along on my journey on LinkedIn or Instagram. And what I do on every show, I do this on my show too. So I have an inner circle group where every guest that comes on, I ask them if they'll do a 15-minute coaching call. And it's amazing. I have thousands of people that listen to my show, but like consistently only 10 people take the action on the coaching call. It's shocking. So I challenge listeners. Like I'll give away for you, Nate, I'll give away 3 of my 15-minute time slots to listeners on the show,
awesome.
Whether you want help or guidance. And here's the thing, like when you do this, maybe I can't help you, but maybe I can, or maybe I can't help you, but you're looking for, you're like, oh, I build websites, Colin, I build websites. I'm like, I don't know how to build websites, but guess what? I have 2 friends that are starting a business and a father who owns a business, and they all need help with websites. Let me introduce you. And that one intro, even though I couldn't help you, could turn into thousands of dollars for you and start your business. So take advantage of these. I'll give away 3 15-minute time slots. Nate, I'll kind of coordinate it with you after the podcast.
Yeah, perfect. That's awesome, man. I appreciate it.
But I'll challenge your listeners to jump on it and see what happens.
Yeah. Why would you not? Like if you're listening, just like, why would you not? So take advantage of that. That's awesome of you to do that. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. And
thanks, Nate.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the time. And so thank you. And that's it, man. That's a wrap.
Thanks, Nate. Appreciate it, man. Love what you're doing.